Welcome to week 29 of the Foundations F260 Bible Reading Plan. My name is Vicki, and I am the Adult Discipleship and Groups Minister at Council Road. And if you've been reading in this plan with us, you know that since January, we've been reading in the Old Testament. And this week and next, they're going to be our last 2 weeks in the Old Testament. So let's make sure and soak up every bit of it we can. Now, last week we started to read in the Bible book of Nehemiah, chapters 1 through 6, and we were introduced to Nehemiah and how he brought back a group of people to the capital city of Jerusalem to help rebuild the wall there. Now, he's bringing back Jewish exiles have been gone out of this capital city for decades at this point. And there had been other waves that had returned, and they had helped to rebuild the temple that was there, which held the presence of God. So this is very important. But there weren't very many people actually living in Jerusalem. And without people there to protect the temple and without walls there to protect it, it left it very vulnerable to attack from outsiders. So Nehemiah gets convicted to bring back a group of Jewish exiles to help rebuild the temple. That's what we read about last week. So this week we're going to be reading in Nehemiah chapter 7 through 12. And I love this here. We're going to see in chapter 7 some really cool things that you'll read about in the commentary, the written commentary that goes along with this plan. But I wanted to just share with you kind of what really convicted me specifically and how I'm trying to walk it out this week. And that comes from chapter 8. So in chapter 8, after the wall's been rebuilt, Ezra brings all the people back together in the town square. If you remember, Ezra is a priest and he's a scribe at this time, and he and Nehemiah are working together. So he brings in this group of Jewish exiles into the town square and he begins to read God's word. And I think it's really easy for you and I to miss how monumental this is. We can read or listen to God's word basically anytime we want to. We've got written copies at our disposal. We've got audio versions. We can listen to the Bible read, like when we're driving to work, when we're working out, whatever. And I think we miss how monumental it was to these people that had been away from any kind of recorded version of their scriptures. And so they are listening. And it is their response that so convicted me in chapter 8. In verse 3, we see that they listened attentively. I mean, they're giving their full-on attention. They're responding to God's word with their head. They're trying to understand what it says, who it says God is, what he's done for their people and their ancestors in the past, how he wants them to be able to live their best lives. Then we also read that they stood at the reading of God's word. They bowed down low to worship him. I mean, they are physically responding to the reading of God's word. And then we see on that second day in verse 13 that the leadership, they went back to study further. They wanted more understanding of God's word. We see that they faithfully go out and they proclaim God's word to others. They tell others of God's goodness. We also see them respond with their heart. The people respond by weeping when they hear God's word, by immediate confession. They're convicted by their sin when they read God's word. And they also respond with great rejoicing at who God is, at his character, and at his proven faithfulness over the years for his people. So how do you and I maintain that enthusiasm for God's word when we can be exposed to it all the time? That's the question I've been asking myself. How can I maintain that? So I want to try to take some clues from these people, these Jewish exiles in Nehemiah chapter 8. First, I want to come to God attentively. And it's easy for me. I love God's word, but it's easy for me to come because I know I'm supposed to or because it's a habit. So first, I want to remind myself daily of just the gift it is to be able to read and to study God's word. Then I want to respond with confession. Now, that's a part I would like to skip over. I don't like the way it feels to contemplate my sin, but I want to be faithful to do that this week. And then I want to respond with really gratitude and focusing on who God is, his character, and his faithfulness. So come along, read Nehemiah 7 through 12 with me this week. Don't leave me hanging. Come get convicted with me, and let's follow him together. God bless.